Good evening, and welcome to another episode of The Thought Variable. I messed around with an app on my computer, so I now have video quality capability, and let's see if I can talk about a new topic, slightly to do with October again. It's Halloween, and I want to talk this time about near-death experiences. We've probably all had them. Maybe you've been keeping count. Maybe you've been keeping track. And I don't mean like I'm going through a tunnel and seeing a light type. I just mean times in your life when perhaps things could have gone wrong, but they didn't. Maybe you got lucky. Maybe you just weren't, it wasn't your time, whatever. But it seems to me that these things do seem a little bit unusual. Maybe they're normal. I don't know. You tell me. But I'll give you a few that's happened to me, and I'll just try to remember them as I go. But I'll start out with cars. When I was very young, and I want to say not quite a teenager, so younger than that, even a toddler, the very first time in a large city, I was left asleep in a car. My mother had gone somewhere, and I had gone with her because I couldn't be left at home. I guess I was too young. And as she was gone into the building of wherever it was we went, the car, and this was actually a truck this time, somehow slipped out of gear, I guess, or the brake slipped off. I'm not sure. But we were parked on in a parking lot with a slight incline, directly in front of a very large highway, like a 4-lane highway, that the car started rolling on its own, gradually picked up momentum. I was still in the vehicle by myself, rolling backwards through the parking lot, and it picked up quite a bit of speed until it, luckily, before going into oncoming traffic, it slammed into the only light post that was in the parking lot and stopped the vehicle. And so that's the only thing that kept me from being in a basically T-bone collision, with oncoming high-speed traffic. And so I guess I got lucky. The car did roll, which is an accident, and I could have easily been smashed, but it was stopped. And then years later, probably about 5-6 years later, perhaps, because I know I was not a teenager, so I must have probably been. No, actually, I wasn't. I was going to school, so I was probably maybe 6. I don't know, something like that. I was going to school. My mom was driving the truck that we had, old vehicle. I was apparently holding a jar. It was probably for show and tell, or maybe I was just an odd kid, and I had a jar. I think it had ants in it, a big glass mason jar. And I was in the passenger seat, and we went around a turn as we were driving to school, and the door flew open, and I rolled out the car as we were going, I don't know how fast, but basically just rolled right out the car into the street and tumbled with this glass jar in my hand. And apparently I rolled the right direction because I rolled off the road rather than, continuing to stay on the road. And luckily I was not run over and I didn't have any injuries. But I guess that could have gone bad. Didn't. A couple of years later, so I was still not a teenager, so probably 10. I'm not really sure. I was left in the parking lot once again, and I had fallen asleep in the car, and this was a parking lot, or I guess the front yard of my cousin's house. This particular car was an old Subaru, as I recall, and we don't really know. My mom went into my cousin's house, and I was too sleepy, so I stayed in the back seat asleep, and I don't know how it began or what happened, but suddenly I woke up, and the car was filled with smoke, completely filled where you couldn't see. And I made my way out of the car. At this point, I don't recall very much. I was probably very young. I don't recall it precisely, but I remember my mother running outside because the car was completely engulfed in smoke. She opened the hood, and that was where the majority of the flames then came up. She tried to put them out with a garden hose. I remember it melted part of, I guess, her finger right here from the heat, trying to put it out. Maybe she got too close, but I know that the car burnt completely to the ground. There was no stopping it. There was apparently a fuel leak, maybe due to the heat of the engine. I'm not really sure how it caught on fire. Maybe a spark from battery. Who knows? But the entire car burnt to the ground. And if the smoke would have made me pass out, yeah, I probably could have not survived that one. A couple years later, I was still less than 10. I was once again left in the parking lot asleep in the back of another pickup. This time, it was a stick shift. And what I think, as I recall, happened, and I mentioned another story previously where I really felt like I was pushed, but I distinctly remember feeling the rolled off the seat and into the stick shift, knocking it into neutral. My mother had not placed the parking brake, so again, the vehicle started rolling backwards on its own because it was parked on an incline once again. She was in the store. I was in the car by myself. It rolled down the hill. This time, I guess a young man ran up to the car. The doors were locked, so he was knocking on the window, as I recall, and I opened the lock and opened the door for him, and then he pressed the brake, and that's how the vehicle stopped from rolling into traffic once again. So yet another time a car almost got me, but this time somebody actually stepped in and saved me. So another time, just continuing with vehicles, I was driving, probably speed limit on the interstate is 70 or 80, who knows, I don't remember. But I was probably doing 70, going down the highway, and a vehicle that was probably, I don't know, 30 feet in front of me or less, I don't know, suddenly I saw from a pickup truck the driver's side front tire exploded. And I've never seen this before or since. I didn't know it was a thing. But the entire rim and the tire and everything shot off of the truck as he was driving whatever. He pulled off the road to the right. I was in the passing lane. The tire bounced. And luckily, on its down bounce, it hit the front of my vehicle and totaled it. Hit the front radiator and completely smashed it in, hit pretty hard, and, pulled over. But if it would have bounced, I guess one more time, it would have went through the windshield, and I would have, nothing you could do, I'd have been decapitated. But that was just another close call. And so there's a few incidents there. Let me see, maybe if I go back chronologically. So when I was a teenager, I remember one time, a friend of mine, we were climbing a hill on a lake that we used to hang out at on the weekends. There was no one there, or we thought this was an area people were not even supposed to be going, but I guess sometimes did. So we were walking up the side of this cliff, kind of not a cliff, a hill, and then I started hearing this fast sound, like zoom, 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 and it was almost like a sound of maybe like a bee or something like that. And I wasn't 100% sure what it was, but I knew it was unusual sound. And I was like, hey, did you hear that? And he said, yeah. But decided to keep climbing. And as we got further up, we noticed what the sound was bullets flying by our ears very closely. Apparently there was a group of bikers, a biker gang, just firing off weapons at the top. And looking back, and even at the time, I'm pretty sure they were firing at us. Of course, once we saw them and what was going on, we turned around and went back down the hill. But that could have went bad. Bullets were close enough that we could literally hear them zooming by, so one could have easily hit me. Let's see. Another time with another friend, I was climbing this time it was a cliff, a small mountain, I guess, but it was a cliff because it was sheer face-ish. Climbing up and didn't know what I was doing. Obviously, I'm not good at climbing or whatever. Didn't have any training, anything like that. It was mostly rock. And slipped, and I remember sliding basically off this cliff, but I caught like a shrub on the side, and that with my hand, and it saved me. I stopped, and then I was able to re-get my grip and then climb all the way to the top. But could have easily have not caught that shrub, and if I would have fell off that cliff, yeah, definitely, it was a far enough drop. It was probably a good 80 feet or something like that straight. Could have landed on a rock and not made it past that one. So there's another time. And another time, once again, a lot of these are teenage years, I guess. When I was a teenager, we used to go to the lake a lot, and one of the lakes we went to had sand, different types of sand. Remember, it was green, blue, red, gray, all those colors of sand. Looking back on it now, that seems very unusual. But all these, I guess you'd say, hills and cliffs were made of sand, including the lake and everything. And there were these shallow areas where it was fun to swim, and there were small rocks, and it was nice and didn't hurt your feet, and you could walk around. But as you walk out a little further, which I did this one time, the sand felt very soft and very nice on your toes and in your feet. And I was like, oh, this is great. And I was walking on it, and it felt like waves. The sand was kind of wavy there, from basically the water, lapping in. But, yeah, as it turns out, I realized my feet got stuck in this sand. And as it did, as the more I struggled, I couldn't get my feet from out of the sand. And this was in a spot that at first my toes could barely touch the ground or the sand, and maybe it was clay, but sand, whatever. It was so fine and soft. Well, anyways, I could feel it, and maybe that's a version of quicksand. I'm not really sure, but it was pulling me down. And I do remember taking a deep breath and going underwater because it pulled me out. I guess maybe from the wave, how when it goes in and it comes back out, pulled me just far enough to where I could no longer reach and was underwater. And I just remember trying to realize what was going on, that, I couldn't just kind of slosh and yank and get myself out. So I sort of relaxed, went underwater, took my time thinking about how to move my feet, and slowly got one foot out, by digging the other foot in, basically, and then reaching as far as I could toward the shore, and then pressing my other foot down, and it worked. I was able to step forward enough to get my head out of the water, but that was a close one. I remember that if basically a few more seconds, and I wouldn't have been able to get out of that. I probably could have drowned. Another time, let's see. We used to water ski once again in the lake. I had fallen after, you ski for a while and you hit some rough waves or something like that and you fall. The boat comes around to get you. Well, my brother was driving the boat, and maybe there was a few friends in the boat, and maybe he wasn't paying attention, but the boat was going pretty fast. Not super fast, but enough. And I remember he was driving to come pick me up, but the boat was heading straight for me. I wasn't really sure what to do, so as it was coming, I jumped out of the water as high as I could and caught, how a boat is like this, so I caught the front, basically, edge of the boat, and the rest of my body kind of hung underneath the boat. This is a prop or propeller boat, so if I wouldn't have done that, definitely I would have went under the boat and in through the propeller. It would have, maybe I would have survived, but that would not have been good, and definitely there would have been a chance that I could have died. Okay, Let's see. Another time, so I used to try to do surfing. Not a very good swimmer, but I used to have some fun. The first time I was in Cancun on a cruise. This time, actually, I was swimming. I wasn't actually surfing on this one. But there had been a large storm out to sea, created some very large waves. Thought it would be a lot of fun to go walk out a ways from the shore, jump into these, and didn't know anything about that sort of thing, but it was a lot of fun, so I'm doing that. I'm a ways out, me and a friend of mine, and apparently, I jumped into one and I got caught in, I think it's called an undertow or a riptide, something like that. And if you know anything about these, water goes like this, and you can either go one way or the other. So it's such a strong current that I remember I was very athletic and I felt like I was trying my hardest to get out of this wave, and I could not do it. Maybe I didn't know what I was doing, but regardless, I was stuck at the mercy of this wave, and it pulled me underwater, and I was underwater flipping end over end. And I remember just feeling like I had no control, so I was just holding my breath as long as I could. And I remember I just kept spinning and spinning for what seemed to be at least a minute. I'm not really sure how long, but quite a long time. A minute seems like a long time when you're underwater. And I'm not very good at holding my breath. But anyway, I remember running into something. And then I realized that I was in shallow enough that I could then stand up. Well, I had rolled all the way back onto the shore, and what I rolled into actually was someone's leg that was walking on the shore, and that's what stopped me from flipping. But I understand now that just as easily when the wave hits the shelf, it can take you out to sea, or it can throw you back onto the shore. Luckily, I got the top version, and I didn't take me out to sea, or else, another time when I might not have made it. Once again, this time I was surfing in Alaska. It's a place called Yakutat. It's the southern tip, so it's not super cold, but it was very cold. The water was freezing. My hands and feet were numb, even I was wearing a wetsuit. So a friend of mine and I had been surfing for, we started out where this bonfire was and where the rest of the people were, but in a secluded part of the beach. All of Alaska is pretty much secluded. There was only like 300 people in the entire town. Where we were, there was probably 5, and these were the people we were hanging out with, but they were basically sitting at this bonfire while we were trying to surf, and after a few hours, I noticed that we were actually drifting further and further out to sea. So once again, this time, we didn't know what we were doing again. The currents were taking us out, and I was not a pro surfer, so I really didn't know what I was doing, but I told my friend, I was like, hey, we got to start trying to swim to the shore because it's taking us further out to the ocean and we could freeze. And he's like, okay, let's do it. And so we laid on our boards and we swam and swam and swam for, to me, what seemed like probably 30 minutes of swimming. And and I said, hey, and I yelled at him to stop. And we apparently had not really gotten anywhere in that time. So I said, okay, the only way we're going to make it back, and I just decided, I told him, is we got to try to catch a wave and ride it back. And this is what we decided to do. And there were some big waves, coming. And yeah, we did end up perfectly catching like the next wave, riding it what I think was probably about the length of a football field before wrecking. And then, so basically the perfect ride, and then falling, and it was just enough to where we could barely touch at that point, and then got back onto the beach and basically laid on the sand until we caught our breath, because it was a lot of work. But yeah, it could have went the other way if we could barely make out the bonfire. It was probably a mile away by that point. So if we would have been lost, no one was looking for us. It would have taken hours for a boat to get there. If you're out at sea, even if they did find you, you'd probably freeze by the time they got to you. So that was a close call. Let's see. Some other times that perhaps could be considered close. I was growing up, I was a teenager. I remember a few times when I had high fevers. One time in particular, uh, I took my temperature, and the last time I remember seeing it, it was 104. And I just remembered that even moving at all, like my hands, anything, any type of lifting of my arm, anything was painful. It was like your entire body is sort of locked up and in pain to the point where any movement at all, maybe it added blood pressure. I don't know why it was painful, but it was. So uh, I remember it took me a few hours to get to my phone, which back then we had landline phones connected to the wall, and I made a phone call to my mom to say, "Hey, I'm sick. Can you come over?" Because I think I was probably 17. I had already moved out by this point, and my mom only lived a few miles down the road. Well, she came, and I just remember, I think she put a wet wash rag, on my forehead, but I think that's about it. And then basically laid there for, I think, a couple of days, and then didn't. We grew up. We didn't have a lot of money, so we didn't go to the hospitals or anything like that very often. And plus, we lived quite a ways from the city. About 35 minutes or so drive. But anyways, regardless, it just kind of toughed it out. And knowing what I know now about, I guess, that sort of thing, it could have gone bad. When you get a temperature that high and you don't do a whole bunch of different things that medical people know how to do, it can go bad. Luckily, it didn't. I survived. So just, high temperatures here and there have happened to me that could have cooked me, but didn't. And then other small things, like I've been in car wrecks. I've had lightning strike, near me, and near, trees in the yard and things when I was there. I've worked with electricity in some storms where you're sort of standing in water, or the equipment might be in water, and you're trying to work on something that's electrified. That's not very safe. And snakes, when I was very young, stepping over rattlesnakes, stepping on rattlesnakes. This has happened. Luckily, I was never bit. Being in the military, I've been deployed to some places, but none of those really seemed like, I didn't feel like my life was in danger in any of those. Tornadoes, things like that. Been near them, but I never really thought in those instances my life was in danger. But some of the others, I kind of did. Or at least after the fact, I realized that. And I just wondered if this is normal. Have you had this many close calls? Like I said, they all turned out okay. I made it and I don't know if I got lucky or there was some sort of guardian angel, or if I just was meant to live on, or the universe loves me, or whatever you want to say. But what do you think? Coincidence? Well, anyways, I just wanted to tell you a few of those stories, so I'll probably make another episode soon. That was, I know it was a while since the last one, but thank you for listening. If anyone wants to be a guest on the show, let me know. Maybe I'll figure out how to add somebody in the future. But thanks for watching. Bye.